This week we speak to Leith Van Onselen, Chief Economist at the MB Fund and MB Super, one half of the dynamic duo that puts together macrobusiness.com.au. He joins us every Saturday morning. He's here now. G'day, mate.
G'day, Luke. How are you?
Very well, Leith. What about you?
Good, mate. Going to Pearl Jam tonight, so I'm pumped.
You what?
Going to Pearl Jam, the concert. Can't wait.
You going to wear a black T-shirt or what do you wear to a Pearl Jam concert?
Yeah, I've got a Pearl Jam concert from one of their 90s concerts, which I've been to every time they come out to Australia, I've been. So I'm a mega fan, so looking forward to it.
There are listeners that love your work from the feedback we get that know that, of course, we've talked about it before, that you do boxing. Are you still boxing?
Yes, mate. I went today. I've done 3 times a week usually. I don't fight anymore. I've done 3 fights, undefeated. But look, I'm a bit old now. I'm 46, so my wife sort of doesn't want me to do it anymore.
Right.
That's fair enough.
We don't want to spoil your good looks.
That's it.
So this bloke is a boxer and he's into Pearl Jam. And just to separate the real Leith from the one you hear, I think it's important to know that. So let's get on with business. I can't believe it. And we've got ABS numbers this week. Now, of course, the government said, hey, we're going to wind back immigration. We're hearing you. But that hasn't happened. And the opposition have been pretty loud on this for some time.
Yeah, it's great to see. So we got some numbers this week. It's the permanent and long-term arrivals data from the ABS. So this is basically their monthly proxy for net overseas migration. Their quarterly data runs about 6 months behind. This gives you a more up-to-date figure. They pretty much track one for one. So it's a very good estimate. And it showed that in the first 7 months of this year, we got 394,000 permanent long-term arrivals. Now, that is a record. That's actually higher than last year's record of 393,000. And it's about 130,000 more than the same time in 2019 before the pandemic. So what this basically tells you is that Australia's immigration continues to run hot. Now, it has started to come down since March, according to this figure. So it has been lower since last year, since March. But once you sum up the first 9 months, it's still, red hot. And every month of arrivals, net arrivals this year, has beaten the corresponding month of 2019. So it shows you that we've still got really high immigration. And just to put it into perspective, Labor's first budget in October 2022, they said we'd have 470,000 net overseas migration over the first 2 years. Well, we had about 1 million. So they've blown that out by about 500,000. That means we needed, over 200,000 extra homes, which obviously didn't get built, which is one of the reasons why I've got this rental crisis. It's the primary reason, to be quite frank. And it was good to see the coalitions basically said they're going to make immigration a battleground issue in the upcoming election. So we got coalition frontbencher Bridget McKenzie told an AFR summit on Monday that basically the long-standing bipartisan approach to high immigration was over. And she said that the compact with the Australian people has snapped on immigration. And she basically cited that first home buyers, renters, et cetera, are getting hammered by high immigration, all for the benefit of the big business, universities, the federal budget, et cetera. And she also said that immigration's masking Australia's productivity decline, which is all true. And look, I personally think this is great because for 20 years we've had basically high immigration shoved down our throats. Most Australians don't support it. Pretty much every opinion poll in the last 15 years has said that Australians don't want a massively growing population. And yet parties on both sides, on all sides, Greens as well, have pushed high immigration down our throats, which has led to all sorts of issues in the major cities. We're seeing it, Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, et cetera, where we're getting crush loaded. People being forced to live in high-rise shoeboxes. It takes you longer to get anywhere. Your quality of life's basically been degraded. And we've got to keep going down that road. I mean, the New South Wales government just this week has deregulated planning to allow more high-rise shoebox apartments. And that comes after we obviously had the high-rise debacle of the second half of last decade where we built all these, defective dwellings with water leaks and flammable cladding and faulty balconies and opal towers, mascot towers, et cetera. And the state government's basically said, yeah, beauty, we want more of that to try and keep up with the federal government's, Big Australia policy. So I'm all for the coalition trying to, put the brakes on because it really needs to happen. We've got a housing market that's chronically undersupplied. We've got an infrastructure that's chronically undersupplied. We're going to have future water shortages. All these things are made worse by running an extreme immigration program. Do we really want Sydney to be over 8 million people in the next 30 odd years? Do we want Brisbane to be the size of Melbourne?
No.
Roughly, or just a little bit smaller than Melbourne is now over the same period? I don't think we do. And this is why we need to put the clamp on.
If you really are addicted to having lots of other human beings around you, there are plenty of cities around the world where that's a thing, and you can move there and leave us, to what we've become accustomed to, which is, a certain quality of life. It's been built up by generations. I mean, there'll be people who worked here 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago who, if they could just pop their head out from under which they're buried and have a look, they would just say, please put me back. And this is not about race or religion or creed. This is purely, isn't it, Leith? It's a story about mathematics. And it's a story about the pie and how it's divided. And that's mathematics. That's got nothing to do with race or anything else. I think the key thing we learned from you today, apart from this week's numbers, and I don't know how many people are aware of this, are you saying that in 2022, the federal government projected a net immigration number over 2 years of 470,000, and instead the government gifted us over 1 million? Is that the number?
Yeah, about 1 million. So we don't know exactly because it's 6 months behind, but it's roughly 1 million. So they basically overshot by about just over 500,000. And so that's basically an extra 200,000 odd homes that we needed in excess of what we would have needed with their initial projection. And this is into a supply-constrained market where basically the costs have gone up to build a house. We've got, a lot of builders have gone under. Builders are competing with infrastructure projects for labour and capital, etc., which means that our supply side is completely stuffed. At the same time as they put a fire hose to demand and just pumped in heaps of people into our major cities, which is why we've got this rental crisis. None of this is rocket science. If you bring in an extra 500,000 people, they've got to live somewhere. Yeah. And hence we have a rental crisis.
And look, there'll be people who don't like the government for a whole range of issues. I said this first, probably a year ago, and it would have been around a conversation you and I had, and this is my opinion. I'm not imposing it on anyone, but I'm just saying that there are lots of reasons why you mightn't want to re-elect this government. I think it is unforgivable that a government, and they say, we're just using the same settings. They get the monthly numbers. They know what's going on. They said to be 470,000. There's 1 million, and they don't have to really worry about the cost of that. That gets landed on in the States. So they fund hospitals and schools and roads and infrastructure, and largely their rules, their laws, and those of councils determine what you can and can't do in terms of dwelling. So the government just opens the door, and the states have to deal with the outcome. And that system's wrong. The state government should be able to say to the federal government each year, hey, we've done a thing here, we've had a bit of a stock take, and we reckon net population growth of maybe 40,000 this year would be ideal, and we would like it that you don't bring in more than 40,000 to this great state. Okay? Okay. But instead, no conversation. Here's a couple of 100,000. Do your best. It's, again, Leith, I say that for people that don't like the government, there's lots of reasons not to. But in my book, this is absolutely unforgivable.
Yeah, and it was deliberate too. Let's be honest. They held the 2022 Jobs and Skills Summit. You might remember that, where they explicitly said they wanted more immigration, and they put in a whole bunch of policies to get that higher immigration. So one of those was to spend $40 million of our money, $42 million, to hire an additional 500 staff at the Department of Home Affairs, purely to rubber stamp visas, to pump through as many visas as possible. And we had the then Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles, boasting about how many visas they'd approved. He was saying, we've approved 3 million visas and blah, 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 and all this sort of stuff. Basically spruiking, how great it was that they were improving so many visas. Well, voila, you get high immigration. None of this is rocket science. This was deliberate.
Lost decade for Australian real wages. Now, I've heard the government spruik about the way they've turned things around here, but what's going on?
So we received the September quarter wage price index from the ABS this week, and Australian wages are grew by less than expected. So they grew by 0.8% over the quarter, 3.5% year on year. Now, that was a bit less than what economists predicted. It's also less than what the latest statement of monetary policy from the RBA predicted, which they released the previous week. And of course, Treasurer Jim Chalmers was out there on Twitter boasting that, real wages have grown for 4 consecutive quarters under Labor, that people are earning more and keeping more, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Now, that's only true if you're looking at headline inflation, which we know has been doctored by Labor through their energy and rent subsidies. If you use the RBA's preferred measure of underlying inflation, we had zero wage growth over the quarter and over the year. And in fact, real wages are actually running well below the employee cost of living index from the ABS. So the ABS, apart from inflation, they release a cost of living index, and it measures it for different cohorts. And if you're an employee household, i.e. a worker household, your cost of living went up 4.7% in the year to September, but the wage price index went up 3.5%. So you've gone backwards. And it's also worth pointing out that Australia's real wages are still 6.7% below their June 2020 peak, if you use headline inflation, and 4% below their June 2021 peak, if you use underlying inflation. So we've all gone backwards. And the real scary thing here, Luke, is that the latest statement of monetary policy from the RBA, which of course these figures undershot that, but that projected that Australia's real wages would only recover by 1.3% by December 2026. And by December 2026, real wages would still be 6% below their June 2020 peak, adjusted for headline inflation. Now, that means that by December 2026, we'll have lost 15 years of wage gains because we'll be tracking at December 2011 levels. So this is real lost decade stuff, whereby basically we've got very low wages, and if you actually extrapolate the RBA's statement of monetary policy projections with a straight line from what they projected, we wouldn't be back to our former peak by the mid 2030s. So it'll take us mid 2030s to get back to where we were in about 2020.
Yeah.
So this is pretty, diabolical stuff. It all gets back to Australia's really poor productivity growth, which I talked about last week. We've got, this a low growth, low productivity economy, which has just basically been run by high immigration and government spending.
Yeah, it masks so much. You're right. The old population growth that we weren't told about. Mate, favourite Pearl Jam song is?
Probably Worldwide Suicide, but there's a whole bunch. There's so many great songs.
Didn't think that'd be the answer.
Or actually, Porch is the one I walk out when boxing fights. So I've used Porch. Porch. Yeah, okay. that was my walkout song.
I'm going to put that on in the car on the way home. It hasn't got any lyrics that would offend my delicate ears, would it?
It does drop the F-bomb.
Oh, no.
In the first sentence, but I don't think it says it afterwards.
Well, I'll certainly be giving that a listen. Porch. All right. Good to talk. Thanks, mate.
All right, thanks, mate.
Have fun tonight. Off to Pearl Jam, eh? Fantastic. Leith Van Onselen.